Where does the drop end? And where does the ocean begin? Think about it for a moment. A drop of water is small, separate, distinct, something you can hold between your fingers. The ocean is vast, stretching beyond what your eyes can see, seemingly endless, swallowing horizons. Surely there must be some point, some precise moment where one becomes the other, right? But look closely, really closely, and you begin to realize there's no such line. The more you search for it, the harder it becomes to find. The border blurs like watercolor bleeding into paper. The line slips away the moment you think you've caught it. Is it when the drop touches the surface, that split second of contact? Is it when it dissolves, spreading into the bigger body? Or was it never truly separate to begin with? Never anything but ocean pretending for a heartbeat to be something smaller? These are strange questions, uncomfortable ones that most people avoid, because they shake the ground beneath our feet. Where do you end? And where does the world begin? Is your skin really a boundary, or is it actually a bridge, a porous membrane where inside and outside dance together? Are you a thing, solid and fixed? Or are you a happening, a process, a verb disguised as a noun? What does it mean to discover you're a drop that was never really apart from the sea? But here's where it gets wild. If you were never apart, then who are you? And what is this I that you keep talking about, referring to as if it were something solid, fixed, permanent, neatly wrapped in flesh and memory like a gift with your name on the tag? We speak of my body as though the body were an object we possess, something we own like a car or a house. We say my thoughts as though the thinker stood somewhere behind them, hidden in the shadows, pulling invisible strings like a puppet master. But go ahead and search for that self, the one who supposedly owns everything, who controls the show, who makes all the decisions. Search honestly and watch what happens. It slips quietly through your fingers like smoke. You find sensations, tingling, pressure, warmth, cold. You find images flashing across the screen of awareness. You find memories, some sharp and others faded like old photographs. You find desires rising like waves and falling like breath. But the owner, the one supposedly in charge, always just a little further back, just out of reach, perpetually hiding around the next corner. It's like chasing your own shadow in thick fog, exhausting and ultimately pointless. And so perhaps the drop was never the real question. Perhaps the question was always whether there ever was a you that stood apart from everything else, separate enough to ask it. We imagine the ocean is out there, somewhere beyond us, and the drop is in here, trapped inside this skin. But maybe, just maybe, what you truly are is not a drop at all, not even a wave, but the entire movement of water itself, the whole dance, rippling, folding, rising for a time in a specific shape, and then falling back into stillness, not lost, not gone, not destroyed, just no longer pretending to be separate, no longer maintaining the exhausting fiction of being isolated and alone. Now, I'm sure that most of you know the old story about the astronaut who traveled far out into the depths of space and was asked when he returned whether he had been to heaven and seen God face to face. And he said yes without hesitation. So naturally they pressed him. They said, "Well, what about God? What did God look like? Tell us everything." And he smiled and said simply, "She is black." And although this is a very well-known and well-worn story, repeated so often it's almost become a cliché, it carries something profoundly important, because what it's doing is shaking loose the image, cracking open the idea that God is nothing more than a white-bearded man perched on a cloud somewhere, sitting in judgment, watching you constantly as if you were some kind of naughty child who can't be trusted. That God, the one you were probably taught in Sunday school with the stern face and the pointing finger, is nothing but a cultural relic, a projection of ancient patriarchy dressed up in religious language. The God who demands absolute obedience, who punishes the wicked and rewards the good like some cosmic accountant keeping track of every tiny transgression. That's not God at all. That's just a myth we've mistaken for the mystery itself. I knew a monk once who began his life as a committed atheist, convinced there was nothing beyond the material world. Then one day he stumbled upon Henri Bergson, the brilliant French philosopher who spoke of élan vital, the vital force, the unstoppable energy behind all life. And the deeper this monk went into that philosophy, diving into those dense pages night after night, the more he realized they were actually talking about God, but without all the robes and rituals and religious baggage. It was God stripped down to its essence, raw and real and undeniable. You see, I've read all kinds of elaborate theological arguments trying to prove the existence of God, and they often go something like this. If you are intelligent and reasonable, capable of thought and wonder and creation, you absolutely cannot be the random product of a mechanical and meaningless universe. It's impossible. Figs do not grow on thistles. Grapes do not grow on thorns. You can't get something from nothing, and therefore you, as an opening through which the universe observes itself, as a window through which existence peers out, cannot possibly be some mere fluke, some cosmic accident that just happened to stumble into consciousness. This world peoples the way a tree brings forth fruit, naturally, inevitably, and the root of that tree, the ground of all being, must itself be intelligent. It has to be. There's no other explanation that makes sense. You see, the very moment we begin to suspect there is intelligence at the root of the universe, something far more than random flukes and blind chaos crashing into each other, we're immediately tempted to leap to conclusions. We say, that must be the God of the Bible, the one we already know about. And suddenly, without even realizing it, we're right back where we started, with the old gentleman in the sky, robes flowing dramatically, eyes blazing with righteous fury, sitting upon an enormous cosmic throne, passing judgment on every soul. But that, I would strongly suggest, is rather like mistaking the menu for the actual meal, or confusing a finger pointing at the moon for the moon itself. The finger is useful. It shows you where to look. But you'd be a fool to stare at the finger and miss the moon entirely. The trouble is not that this image of God exists. Images can be helpful. The real problem is that we've come to believe this image is God, that the map is the territory, rather than recognizing it as a poetic attempt, however clumsy, to describe what cannot possibly be contained in any image, any word, any concept. And of course, this God, this heavenly bureaucrat with his clipboard and rulebook, comes with endless rules, expectations, conditions, and keeps a great invisible record with your name stamped across the top. He supposedly rewards the good, punishes the bad, and watches absolutely everything like an all-seeing celestial surveillance system that never blinks, never sleeps, never gives you a moment of privacy. Now that kind of God may have served a useful purpose once upon a time, like training wheels bolted onto a bicycle, helping a child find balance. But here's the thing. We've mistaken the training wheels for the ride itself. We've become so attached to the safety equipment that we forgot the whole point was to eventually ride free. The reality, the true ground of being, is far subtler, far more mysterious than any bearded judge could ever be. It doesn't hand down commandments carved dramatically in stone tablets. It whispers through the wind when you're not paying attention. It hums in the silence between your thoughts, in that gap where one thought dies and another hasn't yet been born, and it reflects back at you every single time you pause and ask with genuine curiosity, who am I really? What is all this? And so if you still imagine God as something out there, distant and aloof and separate from you, floating somewhere beyond the stars, watching from a safe distance, perhaps it's time to look again with fresh eyes, because the God you're frantically searching for, the one you think you have lost or never found, may actually be the one doing the searching. It may be looking through your eyes right now, wondering where it went, playing this elaborate game of hide and seek with itself. The curious thing about all of this, the truly strange and wonderful thing, is that the more seriously you begin to inquire into your own nature, the more you find the boundaries between you and the universe begin to blur and melt like ice in the sun. You start to wonder, where precisely do you end and the rest of the world begin? Is it really the skin? But think about it. The air flows constantly in and out of your lungs, becoming you, and then becoming world again. Is that air not part of you while it's inside? Where exactly does it stop being you and start being environment? Is it the thoughts rattling around in your skull? But where do those thoughts actually come from? Did you choose to think them, or did they simply appear uninvited like clouds drifting across the sky of your mind? You see, we've all been taught quite convincingly from the moment we could understand language that we are drops in the ocean, small, separate, fragile, temporary. At best, lucky to be here for our brief moment. At worst, meaningless specks floating in a cold, indifferent cosmos that doesn't know we exist and wouldn't care if it did. But that view, you must realize, is simply a metaphor, one story among many, and a rather limited, depressing one at that. Here's a different way to see it, one that flips everything upside down. You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop. Let that sink in for a moment. In other words, what you call you, this sense of being a separate individual, is not actually a thing trapped inside a bag of skin and bones. It is the universe itself playing, experimenting, exploring itself from one particular angle among infinite angles. Through your eyes, existence sees. Through your heart, it feels every joy and sorrow. Through your hands, it creates and destroys and rebuilds again, over and over, dancing this endless dance of becoming. The idea that you are something fundamentally other than the totality, a mere spectator sitting in the stands with a ticket rather than a dancer spinning in the performance itself, is the grand illusion, the cosmic joke being played on no one but yourself. And here's the punchline that makes the whole thing complete. You were never separate. You were never truly alone, even in your darkest moments. You are not looking at God from a distance. You are looking as God through God's eyes, using God's awareness. Just for a little while, just for this brief adventure, you forgot who you really are so you could have the pure joy of remembering, so you could experience the thrill of coming home. Let's try something quite playful now, a little thought experiment. If your image of God still resembles a stern patriarch with a long white beard floating somewhere above the clouds, complete with a booming voice and a detailed list of all your moral infractions ready to read aloud, perhaps it's time to completely invert the whole thing, flip it entirely on its head. Imagine instead God as a woman, and not just any woman but a mother, and not just any mother but an unfathomable mystery, black, not white, silent, not shouting, not a radiant blaze of blinding light, but a womb of infinite darkness from which every star is born, from which galaxies spin into being. You see, for far too long, we've confused light with truth and darkness with ignorance or evil. But isn't it in the dark that seeds grow, pushing quietly through soil toward the sun? Isn't it in silence that the soul finally begins to hear its own voice underneath all the noise? So imagine God not enthroned high above looking down, but rooted deep below, beneath everything, holding it all. Not a king dispensing laws from on high, but the fertile source from which both law and lawlessness arise, the ground from which all opposites spring. And this isn't to say that God is actually female or male or anything in between. That would be ridiculous, like trying to assign a gender to gravity or give pronouns to the wind. God is not a person at all in any way we normally understand that word. God is the process behind persons, the intelligence behind the show, the unfolding, the breathing in and out of existence itself, the rhythm that keeps everything moving. We get caught, terribly caught like flies in honey, in these images, golden thrones, heavenly choirs singing endless praises, someone keeping a detailed score of everything you've ever done wrong. But images are only ever meant to point beyond themselves, not to imprison us in limited concepts. So if your God is always talking, booming commands and threats, maybe try listening instead for the silence underneath. If your God is always shining in brilliant light, try looking courageously into the dark spaces, because it may just be that the light you're chasing so desperately is only visible, only has any meaning at all, because of the darkness surrounding and holding it. And it is from this fertile, unfathomable unknown, this pregnant void, that all things, including you and everything you love, come forth like children being born. So where does all this leave us really? If God is not a man in the sky watching, if God is not separate from the world spinning in space, and not even separate from you reading these words right now, then what are we actually looking for? It's rather like someone searching frantically everywhere for their glasses, tearing the house apart, getting more and more frustrated, not realizing they're already wearing them on their face. Or like a wave desperately trying to find the ocean, searching every direction, asking everyone where it could possibly be. The more you search for God as if it was somewhere else, hiding in some distant location you haven't checked yet, the more distant and impossible it will seem. Because the very act of seeking desperately affirms and strengthens the illusion that you are fundamentally apart from what you seek, that there's a real separation to overcome. But what if you simply stop? Not in resignation or defeat, not in giving up, but in genuine stillness, in that quiet moment when there's finally nothing left to chase, when the seeking itself exhausts itself and falls away, something remarkable begins to stir. A soft knowing rises, not in the head with all its clever thoughts, but deeper, in the marrow of your bones. A recognition dawns, not of something found after a long search, but of something that was never actually missing. The truth reveals itself. You were not really the seeker after all. You were always the sought. And the one doing the looking, the awareness behind your eyes, was always looking through you as you, experiencing itself through this particular form. So what does all this mean practically, in everyday life? It means you don't have to go looking desperately for God in the sky or in some ancient book or in a special building on a specific day. You don't have to believe in fairy tales or pretend to be spiritual or perform elaborate rituals. You can simply start by talking honestly, directly, like you would speak to a close friend who actually listens and cares. Because here's the truth that changes everything. It listens. It responds. Not always with words or voices in your head. Not always with the exact answer you thought you wanted or expected. But with clarity when you need it most. With timing so perfect it takes your breath away. With quiet nudges you can't quite explain rationally, but you know they're real. Call it God if that word works for you. Call it the universe if that feels more comfortable. Call it the intelligence behind all this, the source, the ground of being, whatever language fits. But once you start the conversation genuinely, openly, without pretense or performance, you'll begin to notice something stunning. It was already happening. The conversation was already going on. You've already been heard all along. You've already been guided even when you thought you were wandering lost. The problem was never that it wasn't speaking to you. The problem is we rarely stop moving and thinking and worrying long enough to actually listen, to hear what's being said in the silence. So try it right now. Not because you're supposed to or because some authority told you to, but because it's real, because it works. Speak plain existence. This whole physical world around us is just playing around. There's absolutely no real reason for any of it to exist at all. It's not heading towards some grand finish line. What I mean is, the universe doesn't have some magical spot it's supposed to reach. The best way to really get what I'm saying is to think about music, because music is pure play at its core. Notice how we say you play the piano. Nobody says you work the piano. Why is that? Music is totally different from something like taking a trip. When you're traveling somewhere, you're not actually trying to arrive at the destination. Nobody makes the final note of a song the whole reason the song exists. If that's how it worked, the greatest musicians would be the ones who rushed through songs at lightning speed. Composers would only write ending sections and nothing else. Concert halls would be packed with people who just want to hear one final explosive chord and then leave immediately because, hey, that's the finish line, right? It's the same exact thing with dancing. When you dance, you're not aiming to reach some specific corner of the room where you're supposed to end up. The entire purpose of dancing is simply the dance itself, nothing more, nothing less. But here's the wild thing. We don't see any of this truth reflected in how we live our regular everyday lives. Our whole education system has programmed us to think in a completely opposite way. Everything is organized into levels and grades and stages. What happens is, we shove kids into this long, narrow hallway of the grading system and off you go to kindergarten first, and sure, that's kind of exciting because once you complete that level, boom, you advance to first grade and then it keeps going. First grade pulls you towards second grade, and it continues climbing upward, and before you know it, you're out of elementary school entirely and heading into high school. And now things are really accelerating and picking up speed, and the pressure builds because next comes college, and oh boy, after college you might push into graduate school, and once you finally finish graduate school, you'll step out into the real world at last, and then you'll jump into some career grind where maybe you're selling insurance policies, and there's always this monthly quota hanging over your head that you've got to hit and you're grinding to make those numbers, and the whole time this vague thing keeps approaching. It's always coming, always just ahead, that magnificent thing you're chasing, the grand success you're breaking your back for every single day. Then one random morning you open your eyes and realize you're about 40 years old, and you suddenly think to yourself, holy hell, I actually made it. I'm finally here at the destination. And you know what's shocking? You don't feel any different than you've always felt your entire life. There's this whole group of people who spend decades living just to hit retirement age, carefully tucking away their savings bit by bit. And then when they finally reach 65 years old, they've got almost no juice left in their bodies anymore. They're basically drained and worn out, and they end up wasting away in some retirement community for senior citizens. Because the brutal truth is, we conned ourselves the entire way along. We thought about life like it was some kind of serious journey or religious pilgrimage that had this crucial, meaningful goal waiting at the very end, and the whole point was to reach that end, whether that meant success or achievement, or maybe heaven, after we die. But we completely missed what was actually happening the whole way through. Life was actually a musical experience, and we were supposed to be singing our hearts out or dancing with wild abandon while the music played all around us. Every single morning you open your eyes, right in the middle of a miracle happening, but you have no clue it's occurring. The sky stretches endlessly overhead. Birds pour out their songs without practicing even once, and air flows in and out of your lungs like ocean waves rolling onto beaches. But you scramble around in frantic haste with worry lines carved into your forehead and stress flooding your thoughts as if the world is somehow broken and damaged and needs to be repaired by your personal effort. You're convinced you need to transform into something greater, something more virtuous and moral and talented and accomplished, as if trees work hard and strain to grow taller, or as if stars in the night sky have to push and struggle to create their light. But just look around you for a second. Flowers don't labor and stress, mountains don't try to force anything. And somehow both exist in total completeness beyond any measurement. But human beings constantly forget this basic truth. We launch ourselves on this strange wild chase to demonstrate our value, to outperform the heavens themselves, to create art more beautiful than the very eyes we use to see that art. People get tangled up and confused not by what actually exists, but by what they think about what exists. The moment thinking kicks in, it brings along this fake illusion of being split apart into self and other, into subject and object, into the one who searches and the thing being searched for. A person sees their own face reflected in a river and suddenly imagines they are two separate beings, one who simply is, and another who must work to become something. From the instant of birth, people are taught to push and strive and fight to earn their spot under the sun, as if simply existing wasn't already their natural right from the start. They're taught that love isn't just freely given like rain, but must be earned through effort, that you have to perform impressive acts and constantly improve yourself to be noticed and valued by others. And so love, which should flow as naturally and freely as sunlight without asking for anything back, becomes this transaction, this test you have to pass. People learn that applause means affection, and silence means you should feel ashamed. That gold star stickers and high grades on report cards are the money you use to buy worthiness. And so the stage gets set not for actually living, but for constantly proving yourself. Achievement transforms into your identity, your entire sense of who you are. The crown you place on top of your own head weighs a ton because it's been hammered together from pure fear. You get praised, not for being still and quiet, but for struggling and fighting. Not for being present in this moment, but for making progress toward the next moment. And so you learn to measure your soul using numbers and statistics, to wrap up your worth in job titles and credentials, and to chase after approval like some starving ghost that can never be satisfied. Your mind, which used to be like a clear mirror reflecting everything, becomes a confusing maze instead. Thoughts create more thoughts, each new one trying to fix and correct the one before it. The more information you collect, the more you doubt everything. The more stuff you pile up, the more terrified you become of losing it all. In this twisted mess of constantly becoming something else, You forget the simple, pure joy of just being what you already are. You walk right past the sky without actually seeing it, and hold beautiful things in your hands without recognizing what you're holding. What used to be pure delight in whatever's happening right now becomes this exhausting search for meaning and purpose. You no longer just walk, you rush frantically. You no longer simply breathe, you calculate and plan. You don't look at flowers anymore, you analyze their usefulness and function. The world stops being a mystery that fills you with wonder and becomes just another task on your to-do list. You've traded the actual mystery for a map of the mystery, traded the dance for whatever destination the dance might lead to. And so this play of life keeps unfolding gorgeous and exquisite and completely unnoticed while you remain totally lost in the echo chamber of your own endless becoming. Your ego whispers constantly, "Once I finally achieve the dream, I'll be enough at last." There's absolutely nothing wrong with building things, achieving goals, creating beautiful work. But the moment it becomes your identity, when it turns into how you measure your worth as a human being, you've slapped a mask over something that was already divine and perfect. It's like a flame desperately trying to become fire, like a wave struggling to reach the ocean it's already part of, like a singer trying to impress the silence that cradles and holds her voice. You stare up at the night sky and say with wonder, "How beautiful that is," but have you ever stopped to ask what part of you is doing that looking? We talk endlessly about the miracle of the universe, the spinning galaxies, the massive vastness of space, the golden sunrise pouring over a mountain peak. And yet we completely forget that none of it exists without you being there. Without an eye to see, there is no light anywhere. Without someone to witness it, there is no wonder. Without awareness, there is no world at all. The galaxy isn't simply floating out there in space somewhere. It rises up and appears right here, inside consciousness itself. The sun blazes with heat and light, absolutely, but it's your presence that transforms it into beauty. It's your skin that registers warmth. It's your mind that gives the sky all its meaning and significance. And what exactly is this body you're walking around in? Billions of individual cells working together in total silence, rivers of blood moving and flowing to a song you never need to compose or conduct. You don't consciously tell your heart to beat, it just beats. You don't remind your lungs to pull in air. And yet they never forget, not even once. So why do you keep forgetting who you really are? You are already woven into the miracle you're desperately seeking. The breath moving, the silence between sounds, the seeing itself. The problem isn't that you haven't achieved enough impressive things. The problem is you've mistaken the miracle for a task that needs completing. You've transformed existence itself into a checklist of items to mark off. And so you completely miss the symphony that's playing right now, this very second, without any need whatsoever for you to earn the right to hear it. You want to be loved without realizing you are love itself, seeking its own reflection. You want to be seen without realizing you are the light that allows anything to be seen in the first place. You don't need to prove your existence to anyone. You are existence expressing itself. Let your dreams guide your steps, absolutely yes. The striving, the proving, the reaching, all of it is part of the play, part of the game. But here's the secret, it was always just a game, nothing more. You see, achievement is stunningly beautiful when it flows naturally from wholeness, when it's an expression of joy and curiosity and love, but not when it's a desperate cry for validation. When you wear a mask for too long, it starts to stick to your face, and eventually you actually think you are the mask itself. Let's pause right here and ask something really simple. What exactly are you trying to achieve, and who are you trying to achieve it for? Status, success, enlightenment, inner peace. Do you even know the answer? Or are you just moving constantly because sitting still feels way too confronting and uncomfortable? You see, the very moment you try to become something different, you're implying that you're not already whole and complete exactly as you are. That's the sneaky trick. This constant effort to prove yourself, improve yourself, achieve more and more, it assumes deep down that you're somehow incomplete and broken. But who taught you that lie? Culture, parents, school, society. Somewhere along the way you absorbed this toxic idea that your worth as a human depends entirely on your performance, that you must be built up and shaped and justified. But have you ever stopped to seriously question that basic assumption? To ask yourself directly, who am I trying to impress, and why am I trying to impress them? Most people have no clue. They just keep running on the hamster wheel. Most people never ask themselves these questions. They move through life piling up roles and titles and experiences, believing that somewhere buried in all of it, they will finally become something definitive and solid. But they never stop to notice something crucial. The self they're trying to complete is the exact same self that's inventing the problem in the first place. The real illusion isn't failure. It's the belief that you are a broken project that needs to be fixed, that there's some final polished version of you out there that's worth all this exhausting effort to reach. So before we continue any further, consider this seriously. Is this pursuit actually necessary? What are you really chasing after? Can you paint something more beautiful than your own eyes? Can you craft beauty that's greater than your own skin? Can you sing louder than the silence itself? Can you write a song that's sweeter than sex? Without your seeing, is the sky still blue? Without your awareness, does the moon still glow in the darkness? What is color without sight to perceive it? What is beauty without someone who beholds it and recognizes it? And this dream, this endless striving to be someone important, who told you it was missing in the first place? Human beings keep chasing greatness to prove they are worthy of existing, completely forgetting they are the dreamer and the dream and the one watching it all unfold simultaneously. What if there is nothing to become? What if all your effort is only dust floating in a beam of light? You were never meant to improve the world around you. You are how the world improves itself. All striving collapses and dissolves in this seeing, not into despair and hopelessness, but into profound peace. Because what you sought was never ahead of you in the future. It was always right where you stood all along. The galaxy, the sun, your body, all of it miraculous, all of it already perfect. Without the eye to see the galaxy doesn't exist anywhere. Honestly, holding nothing back. And then be quiet long enough, patient enough, to notice what comes back to you. That's what prayer really is when you strip away all the religious decoration. And it's available anytime you're willing to be sincere and present. Not just on Sundays when you're supposed to be holy, not just when life falls completely apart and you're desperate, but in ordinary moments, in the middle of Tuesday afternoon, when you suddenly remember you were never doing this alone, when you realize you're part of something vast and intelligent and infinitely kind that's been holding you the entire time.